Hello there, and welcome to another of the Medal Department podcasts. And this time we're talking about the medal auction taking place on the 29th and 30th of July. It's another mega two-day sale for you all, 1,300 lots. Catalogue went live a few days ago, so you've still got a couple of weeks until the main event. But I thought I'd just come here and show you a few of my favourite lots. And I'll begin. You've probably guessed it. I've chosen the front cover group, sold by order of a direct descendant. That's lot 538. The honours and awards of Captain Sir Archibald Cochrane, Royal Navy. You'll obviously see we've split the orders up. So the first group is his DSO and bar group. Cochrane, legendary for his command of the submarine E7. He was a pioneer in the Sea of Marmara and racked up an impressive score of enemy vessels sunk, but more importantly, he was the first man and the first submarine ever to fire on a shore battery, creating havoc for the Turks and their transport systems. So he had a DSO, very unlucky to miss out on the Victoria Cross. Three other submarine COs for a similar period in the Sea of Marmara were awarded the VC, but none of those awards are available. So if you're interested in submarines, this is the award to have. He obviously then went on to see further service in the Royal Navy all the way through to the Second World War. He, having won his DSO, he was then sadly caught in submarine nets, and there was a fraught action fought with the shore batteries, and eventually him and his crew were taken prisoner and were sent to the ghastly prisoner of war camp at Yozgad in the centre of Turkey. Cochrane wasn't one just to sit out his time behind the wire, and he and a group of comrades broke out, and the story was immortalised in the famous book 450 Miles to Freedom. That break was led by Cochrane and resulted in the award of the bar to his DSO. Beyond that, the subsequent lots include his GCMG collar chain, the GCMG set of insignia, his KCSI, his K St J, and his Peruvian decoration. There's a full catalogue write-up, obviously, and the lot is also accompanied by a large silver presentation box because he was a Member of Parliament for the Scottish Unionists and ended up being Governor of Burma in the late 1930s. We've also got lots of nice original paperwork and a couple of sets of his binoculars, so probably used in service during the Second World War. So a fine grouping. The campaign awards are sold as lot 538 and carry a pre-sale estimate of 14 to 18,000. The KCSI 8 to 10, and you can view the rest of those items. So we've seen the senior service. You'll obviously have noticed the slight change to the title of our sale, and the two reasons for that are just here on my right. We have been blessed to have the opportunity to sell two very important wristwatches worn by Soviet cosmonauts. The headline act is this watch here, very special this. This is the wristwatch worn by Yuri Gagarin, the first man into space. It's a Rodina wristwatch. It's engraved on the reverse and was sold, both of these watches actually sold in the famous Soviet space program auction held by Sotheby's in the 1990s, so a very solid provenance, sold by Mrs. Gagarin, obviously after his tragic death, and is engraved with details and has a letter of confirmation giving details on the fact that it was the watch worn by Yuri. The second one, I should just state the pre-sale estimate is 25 to 35,000 on Yuri Gagarin's wristwatch. The second one is the watch of Pavel Belyayev, who was captain of the Voskhod 2 space mission in March 1965. This watch was actually worn by Pavel and went to space. He was the captain of the two-man mission, And the famous moment in that mission was it was the first occasion which a spacewalk had actually happened, and Pavel actually captured a really amazing image of that, which you can see. I'm sure it'll be flashed up on this video, and you can see on the website as well. So again, a huge piece of history, a watch worn by a Soviet cosmonaut that actually went to space. This carries a pre-sale estimate of 8 to 10,000, and again has the provenance from the Sotheby's space sale. So two very keenly priced watches with great history, and we expect strong bidding for those on the day. So anybody with an interest in those, please do get in touch, do come in and view them. Obviously with the relaxing of social distancing measures, we're pleased to welcome you all back to SPINK, both for viewing of the lots and during the sale itself. We'll allow up to 10 people in our auction room on the days, and do just get in touch and let us know if you'd like to come in, and we look forward to seeing you then. The final group is one of my favourites on my left. It's the CMG group of 4, lot 546, awarded to Vice Consul Bill Kerr, Consular Service. And this is a really special group because you see the China Medal for 1900 with clasped defensive legations. The siege, which lasted from the 20th of June to the 14th of August 1900, goes down in the annals of history. The Boxers, with their repeated attempts to massacre all of the European and American residents of the legations in Peking. And Bill Kerr, a prominent figure, was mentioned in Claude MacDonald's dispatches, and he was actually manning the barricades. And the thing which really struck me was I had the joy of writing this lot up on the 25th of June, and I managed to unearth a letter actually written 120 years to the day, written by Bill Kerr when he was 5 days into the siege, talking about bullets whizzing all over their heads and how they were preparing all of their defences for what was to come. Tragically, his wife and a young child were also in the legations. The child sadly died as a result of what it went through during the siege. So a really poignant group, and do read the full description. It's a really interesting story. You'll note the Chinese Presidential Inauguration Medal for 1913. Kerr remained in the consular service for a very long time, and he was actually present for the inauguration of the first president of China. And so it's a very rare confirmed award, and just a fascinating group. Carries a pre-sale estimate of 8 to 10,000, and again, on what legations medals have been making, should do jolly well. So there's just a few lots for you to whet the appetite. Obviously do have a look online, ring up and ask any questions, photo requests, please just fire away. And I look forward very much to seeing you on the 29th and the 30th. And obviously we're accepting bids in all the usual ways. And I think now I'm going to hand over to Robert, who's going to talk to you about a few of his favourites which he's plucked out. And thank you very much, and do keep bidding.
Hello there. Marcus has already introduced our next medal sale on the 29th and 30th of this month, and covered a few interesting bits and pieces from his perspective. The magnificent group, of course, to Cochrane, the watches, and the defensive legations group, which I'm sure we all agree are absolutely fantastic, and we know they're going to do very, very well indeed. As he also mentioned, I'm now going to talk to you about a few choice bits and pieces that I particularly like, and will cover here for the next few minutes. Admittedly, I'm not going to talk in a huge amount of detail, otherwise we'd be here all day. But hopefully what I have got to show you will be of interest, and you will also notice it is of a distinctly Napoleonic theme. In fact, they are all either Peninsular, Waterloo or Naval medals from the Napoleonic Wars. And without further ado, I shall start off with the Naval General Service Medal to Able Seaman William Marshall. Now, this is a particularly interesting award because it is a two-clasp medal. with two very, very well-known actions on it, that of the Battle of Cape St Vincent and the Battle of the Nile. So those of you who collect Naval General Service medals will know, multiple class medals to famous Napoleonic actions are highly sought after indeed, and this is no exception. So what makes it even more interesting than having two famous actions of the Revolutionary and Napoleonic Wars on it is that able seaman William Marshall was actually on board Nelson's flagship, HMS Vanguard, at the Battle of the Nile. And as you may know, in this action, Nelson received a head wound, and the Vanguard was very much in the thick of the fighting. They lost somewhere in the region of over 100 men killed and wounded, which even for a line of battleship at that time was a particularly severe test, and it can't have been a very pretty sight in the aftermath of the battle. Of course, the Nile is also famous for the blowing up of the French flagship L'Orient, a vast 120-odd gun ship, which caught fire spectacularly and exploded. There are numerous contemporary accounts of the explosion being so shocking to both sides that the battle came to a standstill for a good few minutes whilst people sort of realised what had happened. The British, of course, were victorious, and the Battle of the Nile caused the remainder of Napoleon's men to be marooned in Egypt, and Nelson added even further laurels to his already glorious record. So able seaman William Marshall was very much in the thick of the fighting. He was wounded himself in that action, which led to his pensioning, and HMS Vanguard went on to, again, a very long and glorious career in the British Navy during the Napoleonic Wars. So we're starting off early with this Naval General Service Medal. This will be Lot 5 and has a pre-sale estimate of £3,000 to £4,000. Moving on then to the Army, to the Military General Service Medal, awarded to Private Abraham Neville of the 20th Foot, with the single clasp here, as you can see, for Victoria. Now, this is one of my personal favourites. On the outside, this doesn't appear to be a particularly exciting medal. Victoria, of course, a very, very famous victory in 1813, but a single clasp to a later battle of the Peninsular War perhaps might not attract a great deal of interest. But as we medal collectors know, it's the man behind the medal and the story that really makes a big difference, and this really exemplifies it. Now, Private Abraham Neville was in the 20th Regiment of Foot, and in the company commanded by a chap called Captain Tovey. Now, this makes it immediately very interesting because although at the Battle of Victoria the regiment were not heavily involved, very shortly afterwards they became famous throughout the army for a very well-known action at the pass of Roncesvalles. And the 20th Foot, as part of the Fusilier Brigade, with the 7th Foot, the Royal Fusiliers, and the 23rd Foot, the Royal Welsh Fusiliers, were guarding a strategic path, no more than a path really, across this pass, when the French army under Marshal Soult was launched across the Pyrenees to attack the British covering force that was protecting Sir Thomas Graham in his siege of Saint Sebastian. Now, the 20th Foot were the only battalion advanced of the brigade across this path, when a French column of no less than 17,000 men under the command of a very able general, Count Ray, attacked. And fortunately for the British, at this time, the narrowness of the track meant that the French couldn't deploy and use their vastly superior numbers to overwhelm the British. So the 20th Foot, alerted, formed up in line and started firing volley after volley at the head of this French column. A French light infantry regiment then deployed its skirmishers in 1s and 2s to snipe at the British line at the 20th foot. The commanding officer of the 20th had to remove these skirmishers to stop this galling fire picking off his men in ones and twos, and so called out to his company commanders that one of them should take charge of the situation and clear away the French skirmishers. Apparently, without further ado, Captain Tovey called to his company, sort of, "Come on, lads, let's show them the way." And Captain Tovey, Private Abraham Neville, and the 70-odd men of his company launched themselves at the French skirmishers to clear them away. The French skirmishers withdrew, vastly outnumbered by Captain Tovey's men, but unfortunately Tovey came across the head of this French column, advancing still further towards them. There was a moment of confusion. They apparently came upon each other when they were not expecting it. And after a moment's hesitation, Tovey is recorded as crying, "Bayonet away, bayonet away." And his company of no more than 70 men, remember, ran at the head of this French column, which must have been at least 700 to 900 strong. So they were outnumbered at least 10 to 1. There was a moment of confusion. The French began to flee in panic, but were rallied, and a rare instance of hand-to-hand fighting with the bayonet happened at this moment. Tovey realised what he was up against, and so horrendously outnumbered, and ordered his men to withdraw back to the remainder of the 20th foot. It is recorded at this time that Private Neville was wounded in this particular action, but survived, obviously went on to live long enough to claim his Military General Service Medal with a single clasp for the Battle of Vittoria. The defence of Roncesvalles was never really recognised as a separate action worthy of a clasp to the Military General Service Medal. But as I said, this is, I think, a wonderful example of a very, very famous action indeed, and one which some severe fighting took place. And Nevilles Medal, lot 11 in our sale, so not long after William Marshall, with an estimate of £800 to £1,000. Moving on now to Waterloo in 1815, we have the rather nice Waterloo Medal to an officer, and an officer in no other regiment than the famous 95th Rifles. This Waterloo Medal was awarded to Lieutenant Vere Webb of the 2nd Battalion, 95th, and it has perhaps seen better days. The ribbon is faded, the suspension is lacking its integral silver pin, but at the same time you can tell that it has been well loved and appreciated, I think, by Lieutenant Webb, who actually interestingly lived on until 1875, so sort of a very elderly veteran of Waterloo when he eventually passed away. Lieutenant Webb was also wounded in action at the Battle of Waterloo, and the 2nd 95th, all 3 battalions of the 95th were at the battle. The 2nd 95th were somewhat in reserve for the first part of the battle. They were on the right flank of Wellington's army, somewhat above the Chateau of Hougoumont, but were very much in the thick of things during the French cavalry charges against the Allied centre. And we know for a fact that the 2nd 95th formed square at one point and were surrounded by French cavalry during the aforementioned charges by Marshal Ney and the French cavalry. We also know for a fact, as I said, that Webb was wounded in action at this time, but survived. Several officers of this battalion were wounded or killed in action, so they were very much in the thick of things, and later on, towards the end of the battle, participated in the final retreat and indeed rout of Napoleon's French forces. And so there is very little more you can really say to have a good solid Waterloo Medal to an officer that really participated in the battle in one of the most famous regiments of the Napoleonic Wars. It is lot 22 in the sale and carries a pre-sale estimate of £2,000 to £3,000. So going back to military general service medals and back to the Peninsular War, next up is the military general service medal with one clasp for Barossa to Ensign Robert Hayden of the 28th Foot. Battle of Barossa was not as highly sort of remembered or thought of compared to other battles of the Peninsular War, possibly for the reason that, of course, Wellington wasn't there. The Battle of Barossa was overseen and commanded on the British side by Sir Thomas Graham, one of Wellington's most trusted senior officers in the Peninsula. And the 28th Foot was part of this small Allied force that essentially was involved in the relieving of the siege of Cadiz. The interesting thing about Hayden as well is that not only have we got here an officer's medal to the 28th, quite a well-known regiment, who also, of course, fought at Waterloo. Hayden, being an ensign, a junior officer, may well have carried one of the regimental colours in action. But interestingly, during the middle of the Peninsular War, after Barossa, he actually sold his commission and bought his way out of the army, but then repurchased a commission not long afterwards in another regiment. And this other regiment happened to be the 44th Foot, another famous unit of the Napoleonic Wars, the Essex regiment. And his particular battalion went off to fight the Americans in the War of 1812. And the 44th participated in several of the later actions, but most notably at the Battle of New Orleans in January of 1815. New Orleans, of course, was not a particularly happy occasion for the British Army. The British forces under the command of Pakenham were launched at the American defences with very little coordination, and the subsequent result being that the British were heavily defeated with vast numbers of casualties, particularly amongst the 44th, very much in the thick of things. And even the commanding officer of the 44th, Lieutenant Colonel Mullins, ended up being the subject of a court of inquiry due to his actions on that day. And so it was a rather unfortunate occasion. But it's interesting to reflect that this medal therefore reflects an officer, not just of the 28th Foot, but the 44th Foot, and who was involved in several very, very famous actions of the Napoleonic Wars. It is a lovely thing, and it forms lot 259, so a little bit further along than the previous medals I've talked about. Lot 259, with an estimate of £2,000 to £2,500, and I think you do very well to get it for that estimate. The next medal to talk about, another military general service medal here, this time a four-clasper to Private Thomas Milburn of the 82nd Foot. It has here the clasps again for Barossa, but also Corunna, Valmiera and Roliça. And Milburn therefore took part in some of the earlier battles of the Peninsular War in 1808, 1809 and of course 1810. Now, the interesting thing about Milburn in the 82nd is that at the Battle of Barossa, he was a member of the 82nd's Light and Grenadier Companies, which formed part of Lieutenant Colonel Brown's, as it was termed, flank battalion, that played a crucial part in the Battle of Barossa. Basically, they were guarding a particular part of the Allied lines when they were surprised by the French that turned them off a hill. Very, very fierce fighting indeed. The Lieutenant Colonel Brown ordered his men to withdraw to a wood at the bottom of the hill, and the situation was rather dire. Sir Thomas Graham galloped up to Lieutenant Colonel Brown and told him that his flank battalion must retake the hill in order to allow time for the rest of his army to come up in support. Now, Brown realised that he was heavily outnumbered, his flank battalion of merely a few hundred men compared to several thousand Frenchmen. But nevertheless, he advanced his flank battalion up the hill, marching in close order up the hill, no firing, just kept going. The French fired volley after volley after volley of musketry into them, and casualties were horrendous. This is also, interestingly, mentioned in one of Bernard Cornwell's Sharpe novels. Sharpe, of course, got around a bit in the Peninsular War, and Cornwell has Sharpe involved in Brown's attack on the hill. And as a matter of fact, Brown was successful despite the vast numbers opposing him. The French took fright at what was happening, and at the end of this sort of part of the battle, Brown halted his men. They fired volley after volley as quickly as they could, followed it up with a bayonet charge, and the French broke and streamed back down the other side of the hill, and Brown essentially had saved the British Army from being surrounded at this particular point, and allowed time for other battalions to come up and support him. So again, the medal to someone who was very much in the thick of a particularly famous action. He was there with Brown, advancing up that hill against the massed ranks of the French, firing at them this sort of hail of lead musket balls coming down against them, and of course survived to claim again his Military General Service Medal. It's a fantastic thing, with more research clearly that can be done, and this forms lot 265 of the sale, with an estimate of £1,200 to £1,500. So that was the penultimate lot that I'm going to cover here, and the final lot, yet again another Military General Service Medal, this time to Sergeant Robert Little of the 87th Foot, and this has the clasps here for Talavera, Barossa and Vittoria, so a real spread throughout the Napoleonic Wars, with Talavera 1809, Barossa 1810 and Vittoria, of course, as I mentioned earlier, 1813. Again, I'm going to talk about Barossa here rather than the other two, because it is at Barossa that the 87th Foot also made a name for themselves, like Brown's flank battalion. The 87th Foot actually captured a French eagle, the eagle of the 8th Regiment of the Line, and it was captured by two men of the regiment, Ensign Keogh and Sergeant Masterman, and so the account goes, and it was written up at the time, that these two gallant soldiers fought their way hand to hand into the middle of a French battalion to try and grab and capture this famous French eagle, each one of which, of course, had been presented to the French regiments by Napoleon himself. Keogh got to the colour, and the account is that he laid his hand upon the staff, whereupon he was unfortunately run through and killed by a French soldier. However, his gallant sergeant, covering him, immediately dispatched the Frenchman, and also the French soldier carrying the eagle, and claimed the colour and actually secured it, and the 87th made a name for themselves. It is also supposed that they uttered a battle cry. They were an Irish regiment. They uttered the battle cry of "For a Ballard," which basically translates as "clear the way," which I think is a fantastic thing. And so they were real rough, tough fighting Irishmen, and commanded by another famous fighting Irishman, Hugh Gough, who made a name for himself in India in the 1840s. So this is particularly interesting because Sergeant Little was there. He was in the regiment at the time that they captured the eagle. He must have been part of that hand-to-hand fighting, and he must have joined in the celebrations afterwards when the 87th made such a name for themselves. And who knows, he may have been feet from the sergeant and his officer, Keogh, when they captured the eagle. So as stories go, it is like, hopefully you will agree, on the other ones that I have covered here, a fantastic thing, and again, you know, it's the sort of thing really that, of course, you say money can't buy it. Well, money can buy it, and hopefully money will buy it on the sale days. So this is lot 266 with an estimate of £800 to £1,000 for this good three-clasp MGSM. I hope you will agree that that's very little money for such a fantastic story, and so I hope to see this medal, and indeed all the medals here, do extremely well. Now, as Marcus has said, the sale is being held over 2 days, 29th and 30th of July. It's another mammoth offering from us, nearly 1,300 lots. Again, I'm particularly keen on these Napoleonic ones. You will see Marcus and I on the rostrum on the day. For those of you who tune in online, you're very welcome as always. As again Marcus has said, we are now able to welcome you back into the room, which is also very good news. So please let us know if you'd like to come in or like to have a look at some of these fantastic medals, hopefully some of them that I've covered today. And thank you very much indeed. I hope you've enjoyed listening to us covering some of our favourite things, and we look forward to seeing you a little later this month. Thank you.